The city was silent except for the hum of distant patrol drones and the occasional crack of collapsing concrete. Smoke hung low in the air, clinging to the ruins like a ghost that refused to leave. Among the shattered remains of what had once been a thriving metropolis, a man sat with his back against a cracked pillar. His armor battered and scorched, the marks of countless battles carved into its surface. His eyes were closed, but he was not asleep. He had learned long ago that true sleep was a luxury he could no longer afford. Instead, he drifted in that half-place between awareness and exhaustion, where every sound could be the beginning of a fight and every silence felt heavier than the last. On his lap, curled close against his armored chest, lay three small figures. Their skin glowed faintly green in the dim light, their silver-white hair cascading over their tiny faces as they slept. Alien children. Their chests rose and fell with steady rhythm, the innocence of their slumber utterly at odds with the world around them. His arms, scarred and heavy with fatigue, cradled them as if they were his own blood, even though they were not. To his right, a German shepherd rested its head on its paws, ears flicking at every sound, but its eyes remained shut. Even the dog had learned to trust him enough to rest, to let him carry the weight of watching for danger. Cale Draven had not expected this. He had not expected to become a guardian, not after everything he had lost. The war had taken his wife, his daughter, his comrades, and any sense of hope he once held. He had fought because that was what soldiers did, because orders were all that remained when the world burned. And yet, when he found these children huddled in the wreckage of a collapsed transport, their small hands reaching out in silent plea, he had felt something stir in him that he thought had long since died. They had been alone, trembling, their voices hoarse from crying, and though they were of the very race humanity had sworn to destroy, Cale had lifted them into his arms without hesitation. Now, as the first cold wind of night whispered through the ruins, he tightened his hold around them. He knew the Legion would not rest. They hunted relentlessly, their black-clad soldiers sweeping through the city to root out anything that defied their order. Protecting alien children was not just dangerous, it was treason. If they caught him, there would be no trial, no mercy. But Cale no longer cared about the Legion's decrees. He had seen too much cruelty to bow to it again. These children were not soldiers. They were not enemies. They were life, fragile and bright, in a world that had forgotten what it meant to cherish life. For that reason alone, he would keep moving, keep fighting, until his last breath. The dog stirred first, raising its head as a distant clatter echoed between the concrete pillars. Cale's eyes opened instantly, his body rigid. He listened, every nerve on edge. The sound faded, replaced by silence again, but silence could be deceptive. Slowly, he shifted the children so their heads rested more comfortably against his armored chest, careful not to wake them. He brushed a strand of white hair from the smallest one's face, then set her gently down beside her sister's. Shepherd growled low in his throat, a warning. Cale placed a hand on the dog's back, steadying him. "Easy," he whispered. His voice was rough, gravel-worn by years of shouting orders over gunfire. "We move soon." The children stirred, one of them whimpering softly before curling tighter against the other. Cale's chest tightened at the sound. Memories clawed at him, his own daughter, Ilara, who used to whimper in her sleep after the bombs fell near their home. She would cling to him, her tiny fingers digging into his uniform, as if he alone could keep the world from crumbling around her. But he hadn't. She was gone, buried under rubble the day the Legion's airstrike leveled their block. He had carried her body out with his own hands, screaming at the sky until his voice was nothing but raw silence. That day, something inside him had broken, and he had vowed never to feel again. Yet here he was, cradling alien children as though they were his own flesh. The weight of his rifle across his lap reminded him of reality. He could not afford sentiment. Protecting them required clarity, vigilance, and ruthlessness. He could not falter, not for a second. Shifting carefully, he adjusted the weapon strap, checked the magazine, and scanned the shadows between the pillars. A faint neon glow flickered in the distance, where one of the city's last remaining signs still sputtered against the dark. Beyond it, movement. Cale's breath caught, his instincts surging. Shapes do, no, 3 moving with precision. Legion scouts. Day, were coming closer. Rex was already on his feet, hackles raised, though silent. Cale scooped up the children, 1 in each arm, and the 3rd against his chest. Their soft bodies, light compared to the weight of his armor. They stirred again, but did not wake, exhaustion claiming them too deeply. He moved swiftly, silently, years of battlefield experience guiding his steps. He slipped between the shadows, keeping low, hugging the ruins where cover was thickest. Every sound seemed amplified, the scrape of his boots, the creak of his armor, even the soft breaths of the children. But the Legion patrol pressed on, unaware. Their voices muffled by their helmets as they scanned the area. Cale ducked into the hollow shell of a collapsed building, pressing his back against the wall as the patrol passed. He could feel the children's hearts beating against him, quick and fragile. He held his breath, every muscle tense, until the soldiers' voices faded into the distance. Only then did he let out a slow exhale, the kind that seemed to empty more than just his lungs. He looked down at the small faces nestled against him, their expressions peaceful despite the danger. "Still with me," he murmured. "Good." Settled deeper into the ruins, setting the children down on a patch of broken carpet, its fabric frayed but softer than concrete. Rex lay down at the entrance, his body blocking the way, ears pricked. Cale allowed himself a moment to rest, leaning against the cracked wall. His body ached with exhaustion, the weight of his armor pressing down on him like chains. He wanted nothing more than to close his eyes and let sleep drag him under, but he knew better. Sleep was a thief, stealing awareness when it was needed most. Instead, he stared at the children, studying them. Their features were delicate, their green skin almost luminescent in the faint light. He did not know their names, had not asked. They were too young to explain, too traumatized to speak much at all. Sometimes they whispered in their alien tongue to one another, soft and melodic. But when they looked at him, their eyes were wide with trust. That trust was a heavier burden than any rifle or armor. It demanded more of him than orders ever had. He had to be strong, not just for himself, but for them. They did not know how to survive in a world like this. He did. That made their lives his responsibility. Outside, the night deepened. The wind carried the smell of smoke and ash, mingled with the faint metallic temps of blood that never seemed to leave the city. Cale shifted, pulling his cloak over the children to keep them warm. Rex inched closer, laying his body against theirs, offering his own warmth. Cale almost smiled at the sight. Even the dog, hardened by war, understood what was worth protecting. Hours passed in uneasy stillness. Cale's mind wandered despite his efforts, fragments of memories surfacing against his will. Lara's laughter, the way she would tug at his sleeve when she wanted to be lifted onto his shoulders, the way she had sung to the stars, her voice small but certain, believing they could hear her. She had been the light in his world, and when that light was extinguished, he had stumbled in the dark ever since. But these children, these fragile alien lives, rekindled something faint, like embers refusing to die. Perhaps it was foolish. Perhaps it was dangerous. But as he watched their small chests rise and fall in sleep, Cale felt that ember glow a little brighter. The sound of gunfire shattered the silence, sharp and close. Cale's instincts flared, his hand tightening on his rifle. Rex barked once, low and urgent. The children jolted awake, eyes wide with fear, clutching at each other. Cale crouched low, putting a finger to his lips. "Quiet," he whispered. They obeyed, trembling but silent. The gunfire echoed again, followed by the scream of metal tearing apart. A patrol was close, too close. He had to move. He scooped the children up once more, signaling Rex with a hand gesture. The dog padded ahead, silent and alert. Cale moved swiftly through the ruins, weaving between shadows, every step measured. His heart pounded, but his mind was clear. He had lived too long in war not to know what to do. They reached a collapsed overpass, its concrete slabs leaning against each other to form a crude shelter. He ushered the children inside, pressing them against the cold wall. "Stay here," he told them. "Do not move. Do not make a sound." Their eyes were wide, but they nodded. One of them reached for his hand, her small green fingers trembling. He squeezed it gently before pulling away. "I'll be back." Rex stayed with them, his body curled protectively around theirs. Cale moved back into the shadows, rifle ready. The patrol was closer now, their footsteps crunching over debris. He could see them through the cracks, 3 soldiers in black armor, scanning with rifles raised. They were methodical, relentless. Cale's breath slowed, his focus sharpening to a razor's edge. He waited until one drew too close, then struck, silent and swift. A blade slipped between armor plates, the soldier collapsing without a sound. Cale dragged the body into the dark, then turned his attention to the others. The fight was brief, brutal, over before it began. 3 bodies lay still in the ruins, their weapons taken, their helmets cracked. Cale returned to the shelter, wiping blood from his blade. The children's eyes were on him, wide and unblinking. He crouched, setting his rifle aside, and brushed their hair gently. "It's over," he whispered. "You're safe." One of them reached for him again, clutching at his armor. He let her, even as his heart ached. They trusted him, despite everything. And he would not betray that trust. When the night finally gave way to the first pale light of dawn, Cale was still awake. The city stretched out before him, broken and scarred, but in the midst of ruin, he felt something he had not felt in years. Purpose. He did not know where their path would lead, or how long he could keep them safe. But he knew this. As long as he drew breath, as long as his hands could hold a weapon and his body could move, these children would live. They were his charge now, his reason to keep fighting. And in a world that had taken everything from him, that reason was enough. The dawn came pale and reluctant, filtering through the jagged skeletons of towers that once reached proudly for the sky. The light revealed scars everywhere, blackened concrete, twisted rebar, streets fractured by bombs and fire. Cale adjusted his grip on the children as they stirred awake, their luminous eyes blinking against the new day. They were hungry. He could see it in the way they clutched their small bellies, the way their thin shoulders sagged. Hunger was a constant companion now, for humans and aliens alike. Food was scarce, and what little remained was hoarded by the Legion or sold for blood. He dug into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a ration bar, cracked in half. He hesitated, then broke it again, dividing it into 3 uneven pieces. His own stomach clenched with emptiness, but he ignored it and pressed the food into their small hands. They looked at him uncertain, then at each other. Slowly they ate, chewing with delicate care, as though the food might vanish if consumed too quickly. Watching them stirred something raw inside him. He had seen soldiers eat greedily after battles, tearing at their rations as if it were their last meal. But the children shared with one another without words, each making sure the other had enough. Rex patted over and nudged Cale's arm with his nose. Cale offered the dog a scrap of dried meat from another pouch, which Rex accepted gratefully, tail thumping once against the ground. For a moment, there was peace, fragile and fleeting, but real. Cale allowed himself to breathe. The peace ended with the low growl of vengeance in the distance. Cale froze, tilting his head to listen. The rumble was faint but growing louder, rolling through the hollow streets like a storm. The children's ears twitched, their eyes wide with alarm. They clutched at his armor instinctively. Cale's jaw tightened. Vehicles meant Legion convoys. They swept through cities like predators, dragging survivors from hiding, burning what they couldn't take. He lifted the smallest child onto his back, motioning for the others to cling to him, their tiny arms wrapped around his neck, trusting. "Hold tight," he whispered. Rex barked once, sharp and low, already alert. Cale moved quickly, hugging the shadows, weaving between collapsed walls and shattered vehicles. He knew the city's bones had fought and bled in its streets. So that knowledge was all that kept them alive now. The convoy came into view at the end of the street. Armored transports, black and angular, their engines growling like beasts. Soldiers in dark armor rode on the sides, rifles ready, eyes scanning. Cale ducked behind the burnt husk of a transport, heart pounding. The children clung tighter, silent but trembling. He could feel their fear against his skin. Could almost hear the racing of their small hearts. The convoy slowed, soldiers dismounting. They began sweeping the area, methodical and efficient. Cale cursed under his breath. They were searching, and it wouldn't take long before they reached his position. He glanced around, searching for an escape. The street ahead was blocked by rubble, too steep for the children to climb quickly. The only way was up. He grabbed the edge of a collapsed balcony, hauling himself up with the strength born of desperation.
X.
Leapt nimbly after him, claws scrabbling. On the concrete, Cale pulled the children up one by one, setting them gently on the ledge. They clung to him, their pale fingers digging into his armor. He whispered encouragements, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. Almost there. Stay quiet. You're safe. The soldiers below drew closer, their boots crunching over debris. Cale pressed the children flat against the balcony, his body shielding them. He could see the gleam of their visors through the cracks, hear the rasp of their filtered breathing. One soldier paused, head tilting as if sensing something. Cale's grip on his rifle tightened. If it came to it, he would fight, but the children would be caught in the crossfire. He prayed silently to gods. He no longer believed in that it wouldn't come to that. After what felt like an eternity, the soldier moved on, called back by his squad leader. The convoy's engines roared again as they resumed their sweep, the sound receding slowly into the distance. Cale exhaled, only then realizing how tightly he had been holding his breath. He looked down at the children, their wide eyes reflecting the morning light. They were safe. For now, he helped them down from the balcony, setting them gently on the ground. One of them, the smallest, reached up and touched his face, her green fingers cool against his skin. She said something in her language, a soft string of syllables. He didn't understand, but the meaning was clear enough. Thank you. Cale swallowed hard, his throat tight, nodded once, unable to speak. They moved on, skirting the edges of the city. Cale kept them close, scanning constantly for signs of danger. Every shadow was suspect, every silence a threat. Yet, despite the fear, there were moments that pierced the darkness. The children whispered among themselves, their voices soft and melodic, and sometimes they even smiled. Rex trotted alongside them, letting them bury their small hands in his fur. Cale watched, and for brief moments, he felt almost human again by midday. The sun was high and merciless, beating down on the ruins. Cale led them to an old metro station, its entrance half buried by rubble. He pried open a rusted gate and guided them inside. The air was cooler, damp with the scent of stone and mildew. Broken lights flickered weakly overhead, their power somehow still clinging to life. The children gazed around with wide eyes, their voices echoing softly in the cavernous space. Cale found a corner where the walls curved inward, offering some shelter. He set his pack down and rummaged through it, pulling out what supplies remained. Not much, a few ration bars, a canteen of water, a small med kit. It would have to do. He shared water with the children, watching them sip carefully, their luminous eyes soft with gratitude. Rex lapped at the remaining drops, his tongue rasping against the metal. Cale leaned back against the wall, letting the weight of exhaustion press down on him. His muscles ached, his mind weary. Yet he could not rest. Fully. Not while danger still lurked. He kept his rifle within arm's reach, his ears tuned to every sound. The children huddled together under his cloak, their small bodies pressed for warmth. Their breathing slowed, and soon they drifted into sleep. He studied them, his chest heavy. They reminded him so much of Alara. Different faces, different skin, but the same innocence, the same trust. He remembered how she used to curl against him when she was afraid, how her small hand would clutch at his fingers. The memory was a knife and a bomb all at once. He had failed to protect her. But maybe, just maybe, he could protect them. Hours passed. Shadows stretched long across the station as the sun dipped lower. Cale dozed lightly, his dreams fractured, filled with fire and screams. He woke to Rex's growl, low and steady. His hand was on his rifle before his eyes were fully open. He scanned the darkness, every muscle taut. A faint sound echoed from deeper in the tunnel's footsteps. Not Legion, Too light, too hurried. Survivors. Kale motioned for Rex to stay close, then rose silently, moving toward the sound. His boots crunched softly on the gravel, his rifle raised. The footsteps drew nearer, accompanied by ragged breathing. A figure stumbled into view, a man, gaunt and dirty, his eyes wide with fear. He froze when he saw Kale, hands raised instinctively. "Please," the man whispered hoarsely. "Don't shoot. I'm not with them." Kale studied him, suspicion sharp in his gaze. Survivors could be dangerous, desperate, willing to betray for a scrap of food or favor with the Legion. "What do you want?" Kale's voice was low, steady, but edged with warning. The man swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Sanctuary. There's a place, they say. North. Past the river. Humans and others. Safe from the Legion." His eyes darted toward Kale's pack, then back to his face. "Yeah, I was trying to get there. Haven't eaten in days, please. Just don't kill me." Kale's mind raced. Sanctuary. He had heard whispers, rumors pass between dying soldiers and desperate civilians. A place beyond the Legion's reach, where survivors, human and alien alike, lived free. He had dismissed it as fantasy. But now, could it be real? If it was the only hope these children had. He lowered his rifle slightly, though his stance remained wary. "If you're lying, I'm not," the man interrupted quickly, shaking his head. "I swear it." Kale studied him a moment longer, then jerked his head toward the corner where the children slept. "Stay there. Make one wrong move, and it's your last." The man nodded vigorously, relief flooding his features. He stumbled to the wall, collapsing against it with a groan. His hands trembled as he pulled a cracked flask from his coat, sipping greedily at the last drops inside. Kale watched him with cold eyes, then returned to the children. They stirred as he sat, blinking up at him with sleepy eyes, brushed their hair gently, murmuring reassurance. Sanctuary, the word echoed in. His mind, a fragile hope stirring where none had been before. Perhaps it was real. Perhaps it was just another lie. But either way, he had to try. For them, he looked at the children, their small faces illuminated by the faint flicker of the dying lights. For the first time in years, Kale felt something. Close to determination that was not born of orders or survival. It was born of love, raw and undeniable. He would take them north. He would find this sanctuary, if it existed. And if it did not, he would carve one out with his own blood if he had to. The Legion would hunt them. The road would be brutal. He might not live to see the end of it. But these children would. He swore it. As long as he drew breath. As long. As he stood between them and the world, they would survive. Rex settled at his feet, eyes glinting in the dim light, as if sharing in that vow. Kale reached down, resting a hand on the dog's head. "We'll get them there," he murmured, one way or another. The night pressed close around them, heavy with silence. The city was still broken, still dangerous, still haunted. But for the first time in a long time, Kale Draven had a purpose that was more than survival. And that purpose was enough to keep him moving, no matter what came next. The night was long, filled with echoes that stirred fear in the bones. Somewhere deep in the city, gunfire cracked like thunder, followed by the muffled roar of explosions. Each sound made the children stir in their sleep, their small bodies. Pressing closer together beneath Kale's cloak, Rex stayed awake at the mouth of the metro tunnel, ears pricked, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. The survivor, the gaunt man Kale had allowed to stay, slept fitfully against the wall. Muttering in dreams Kale did not care to understand, when the gray light of dawn finally seeped through the broken gates. Kale stirred the children gently. They blinked at him with bleary eyes, clutching his armor as he helped them to their feet. The man groaned and stretched, his face pale and drawn. "We should move," he rasped, rubbing the grime from his eyes. "Convoys sweep the main routes. Every morning. If we're caught here, we're dead." Kale didn't need the reminder. He had survived too long to forget the Legion's routines. He slung his pack over his shoulder and motioned for the children to stay close. "You know the way north," Kale said, his tone flat, neither trusting nor entirely dismissing. The man nodded quickly. I've heard the roots. I can get us. Past the river, Cale's eyes narrowed. Your name? The man hesitated, then licked his cracked lips. Darren. Cale studied him for a long moment, then turned away. Names meant little now, but trust was rarer than food. Darren would earn neither without proving himself. Still, Cale could not ignore the possibility that this man carried knowledge they needed. They moved through the streets in silence, weaving between ruins, their footsteps muffled by dust and ash. The children clung to Cale's cloak, their small feet padding quietly behind him. Rex scouted ahead, his nose low to the ground, tail stiff. Darren followed, his eyes darting nervously to every shadow. The city seemed to watch them, hollow windows, staring like empty sockets, steel skeletons reaching upward like broken hands. At midday, they stopped to rest in the shell of a collapsed building. Cale gave the children water, rationing every drop. Darren watched hungrily, his own flask empty, but Cale offered him nothing. He didn't trust him enough to share yet. The man muttered something under his breath, but when Cale's eyes cut toward him, he fell silent. The children huddled together, whispering softly in their own tongue. One of them, the oldest by her size, picked up a shard of glass and traced shapes into the dust stars, Cale realized, though crudely drawn. She pointed to them, murmuring to the others. They smiled faintly, a fleeting glimpse of joy in the midst of ruin. Cale's chest tightened. Lara had done the same when she was their age, tracing constellations on the window when the sky was too dark with smoke to see the real ones. He turned away, scanning the horizon. The convoy tracks in the dust were fresh, leading east. If they stayed on their current course, they would cross paths by nightfall. He adjusted their route, moving north through the ruins where the buildings still stood high enough to provide. Covered by evening, the city began to thin. The skeletal remains of towers gave way to shattered suburbs. Houses collapsed into piles of rubble, streets overgrown with wild grass that clawed through the cracks. The air smelled different here, less of smoke, more of damp earth and decay. The children grew restless, stumbling with fatigue. Cale lifted the smallest onto his back again, carrying her as the others clung to his sides. Their trust was a weight heavier than his armor, and yet he bore it gladly. Darren lagged, panting heavily.
Ow.
We should rest, he gasped. Cale ignored him, pressing on until they reached the husk of a school building. Its roof was gone, and vines crept through shattered windows, but the walls still stood. He guided the children inside, settling them in a corner. Rex curled beside them immediately, his body warm against their small frames. The children relaxed, leaning into the dog's fur, their fear easing for the moment. Cale watched them for a long time, his rifle resting across his knees. Darren collapsed against the opposite wall, wheezing. After a moment, he spoke, his voice hoarse. Why? Cale looked at him coldly. Why? What? Why them? Darren gestured weakly toward the children. They're not even ours. They're the reason the world burned. Why risk your life for them? Cale's jaw tightened. Memories surged to Lara's laughter, her cries, the rubble, the silence that followed. 'Cause they're children, he said finally, his voice low but sharp as steel. No, because no one else will. Darren stared at him, confusion and something like shame flickering across his face. He looked away, saying nothing more. The night pressed in, heavy with silence. Cale dozed lightly, waking at every sound. At one point he felt a small hand against his armor. One of the children had crept closer, curling against his side as she slept. He froze, then slowly lowered his arm, letting her nestle beneath it. Her breathing steadied, her small body warm against him. He stared into the darkness, his throat tight. For the first time in years, the silence felt less suffocating. At dawn, they set out again. The landscape shifted as they moved northfields. Overtaken by wild growth, rivers clogged with debris, the skeletons of vehicles rusting in the grass. Birds called faintly in the distance, a sound so rare it felt alien. The children listened, wide-eyed, as if hearing music for the first time. But danger was never far. By midday, they heard the unmistakable rumble of engines again. Cale cursed, pushing them into the cover of an overgrown ditch. The convoy was smaller this time to transport 6 soldiers, but it was enough to end them all if they were spotted. Darren shifted nervously, his breath loud in the stillness. Cale pressed a hand against his chest, forcing him still. "Breathe. Quieter," he hissed. The soldiers passed slowly, scanning the fields. One paused, staring into the ditch. Cale's finger tightened on his rifle. Rex growled low, the children clutching at Cale's armor. The soldier lingered a moment longer, then turned away, climbing back into the transport. The convoy rumbled onward, leaving a trail of dust in its wake. They waited until the sound faded completely before moving again. Cale's heart pounded, but his face remained calm. Children looked at him with wide eyes, their trust unwavering. He nodded once, silently promising he would not fail them. By evening, they reached the river. Stretched wide, its waters dark and sluggish, choked with debris. The bridge had long since collapsed, its twisted remains jutting from the water like broken bones. Cale scanned the banks, searching for another way across. Darren pointed upstream. There's a crossing, 1/2 mile. Shallow enough to wade. Cale hesitated, suspicion gnawing at him, but there was no choice. He led them along the riverbank, keeping low. The crossing was as Darren described, the stretch where the water spread shallow, glinting under the dying light of the sun. Cale tested it. The current strong but passable. He carried the children one by one across, Rex swimming beside them. Darren stumbled after, nearly swept away, but Cale grabbed his arm, hauling him to safety. They collapsed on the far bank, soaked and shivering, but alive. The children clung to him, their teeth chattering. He wrapped them in his cloak, holding them close until their trembling eased. Night fell swift and cold. They found shelter in the ruins of a farmhouse, its roof caved, but walls still standing. Cale lit a small fire, shielding the smoke as best he could. The children huddled around it, their green faces glowing in the flickering light. They whispered softly to one another, their voices lulling against the crackle of flames. Darren sat, apart, staring into the dark. After a long silence, he spoke. "The sanctuary, they say it's real, but it's hidden in the mountains, protected by those who still fight. A place where the Legion doesn't reach." His eyes flicked to the children, then back to the fire. "If it's true, maybe they'll have a chance." Cale said nothing. Hope was a dangerous thing, but he felt it stir nonetheless, fragile and insistent. He looked at the children, their small hands clutching each other, their eyes heavy with sleep. He brushed a strand of white hair from the smallest one's face, his chest tightening. He didn't know if Sanctuary was real. He didn't know if they would live to see it. But he knew this. He would walk every mile, fight every battle, bleed every drop of his strength to try, because they deserved a world better than this. The fire crackled softly, casting long shadows. Across the ruins, outside, the night whispered with distant engines, the Legion still searching, still hunting. But within that small circle of light, there was warmth, and there was a vow unspoken. Cale Draven would not stop, not until they were safe. Not until hope had a home again, asterisk. Night deepened, and the ruins seemed to breathe with a life of their own. Crumbling towers whispered as the wind threaded through their broken windows. Somewhere far off, a low, metallic hum vibrated through the streets. The patrols were on the move again. Cale knew the sound too well. The rhythmic drone of Legion scout drones searching for survivors. He sat with his back against the same pillar. The children curled up against his chest, their small bodies radiating warmth that his armor could not. Rex stirred, ears twitching, nose sniffing the damp air. The old dog gave a soft growl, low and warning. Cale's hand instantly went to Rex's head, steadying him with a soft pat. "Not yet, old friend," Cale whispered. "Let them sleep." The alien children slept without stirring, though every boom of distant thunder and every groan of shifting rubble might have woken human children. Their strange biology, Cale had learned in the few days with them, made them more resilient too. Noise, but not to fear. He remembered the first night when little Nemi had cried herself to sleep, whispering words Cale could not understand. That sound had torn through him more than any battlefield scream. The drones came closer, their hum echoing off shattered walls. Cale shifted slightly, pulling his rifle closer, though he knew firing would give away their position. He adjusted his breathing, trained in the old ways of stillness, listening for the metallic skitter of machines on broken stone. Then silence. For a long moment, he thought they had passed. But Rex's hackles remained raised, his body stiff like a coiled spring. The dog never lied. Cale's fingers tightened on the rifle grip, and then he saw it. A red light flickered across the wall opposite them. Scanning. The drone floated silently into view, no larger than a dinner plate, its lenses worry as it swept the ruins. Cale cursed under his breath. He had no EMP grenades left, no jammers, no tools. Just an old rifle, his armor, his will, and the 3 lives depending on him. The drone paused, its lens angling toward the pillar where they sat. Cale closed his eyes for a heartbeat.
All knowing what he had to do.
He shifted the children gently, laying them flat on the rubble. Rex moved forward, silent as shadow, crouching low. Cale gave him a subtle hand signal, the same one they had practiced years ago in the war. Rex waited, poised, his teeth bared. The drone buzzed closer, its red light sweeping over Cale's armor. The recognition system would trigger in seconds. Cale didn't hesitate. Now. Rex lunged, jaws snapping onto the drone with a metallic crunch. Sparks flew as the machine whirled and screeched. Cale surged forward, jamming his combat knife into the drone's core. The machine sputtered, flailed, and went silent. Cale pulled it free, lowering it carefully to the ground, though his heart thundered. They had bought seconds, not safety. The sound of the drone's destruction would alert others. He turned back. The children were awake now, eyes wide with fear, their pale faces glowing faintly in the dim light. Nemi clutched Sora's arm, whispering something in their alien tongue. Lyra looked directly at Cale, her silver eyes filled with a question. He didn't need translated, "Are we safe?" Cale exhaled. "Not here, we move." He lifted the smallest child, Nemi, into his arms, and motioned for the others to hold on to his armor. Rex padded close, ever watchful. Together they slipped into the dark labyrinth of the ruins, every shadow a possible enemy. By dawn, Cale found what he had been searching for, a collapsed subway entrance, partially buried under rubble, but still offering a passage below ground. He led them inside, guiding the children down the cracked stairs. The smell of damp earth and rust filled the air. It was not safe, but safer than the open streets. They settled in a hollow chamber where faint graffiti still lingered on the walls, old slogans from the resistance. Some faded to illegibility. Cale laid the children down on a makeshift bedding, a fabric he'd scavenged days ago. Rex circled once and lay down beside them, protective as ever. Cale sat against the wall, exhaustion washing over him in waves. His eyelids grew heavy, but his mind refused rest. Images of the drone replayed again and again, but so too did flashes of his daughter Anna. He saw her face in the pale glow of the alien children, saw her small hands in theirs. Anna had been the same age when the war claimed her. He had failed. Failed to protect her. That guilt was a blade that never dulled. And yet, here he was again. 3 more lives in his hands, 3 more chances. Perhaps fate had not cursed him, but given him a chance at redemption. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I won't fail them too." Sleep claimed him at last, though it was shallow, haunted by dreams of fire and ash. Cale woke to a sound that snapped him instantly. Alert footsteps, faint but deliberate, echoing through the subway tunnels. Not the uneven shuffle of scavengers. Not the mechanical tread of drones, human boots. Multiple. He rose silently, motioning Rex to stay with the children. He crept forward into the shadows of the tunnel, rifle raised, senses sharp, voices muffled, but distinct. Rex said he was sighted near Sector 7. They'll be looking here too. Orders are clear. Dravon doesn't leave this city alive. Cale's stomach tightened. They weren't just searching for survivors. They were searching for him, the Legion knew. He crouched lower, watching as 3 armored soldiers emerged into view, their visors glowing faintly. Legion troops, armed, efficient, ruthless. Kale could retreat, try to avoid them, but the children. If the Legion found them, there would be no mercy. The aliens were the enemy in the Legion's eyes. It's just like Kale. He steadied his breath. The rifle felt heavy in his hands, but his resolve was iron. If they want me, they'll have to bleed for it. Kale remained crouched in the shadows, eyes fixed on the 3 Legion soldiers advancing down the tunnel. Their visors cast faint white beams that cut through the gloom, sweeping across the debris-littered floor. Each step echoed with authority. These were not scavengers or deserters. These were hunters, trained to track and eliminate. The first soldier raised a scanner device, sweeping it from side to side. A green holographic grid fanned out across the tunnel walls, scanning for heat signatures. Kale's gut tightened. Children, their bodies might show faintly, even through the rubble where they slept. He had seconds, maybe less. Kale tapped the side of his armor, activating the thermal dampeners, an old trick from his battlefield days. His suit wasn't in perfect shape anymore. Half its systems flickered unreliably, but the dampeners still worked. For himself, at least. The kids didn't have that luxury. The scanner let out a faint beep. The soldier frowned beneath his visor. I've got something. Faint signature. Small. Could be rats, could be something else. The second soldier adjusted his grip on his pulse rifle. Orders were clear. We find Draven. We kill him. If he's hiding rats, we kill those too. A cold fury burned in Kale's chest. He remembered too clearly the way the Legion had turned. Against its own people after the war, branding deserters and resistors as traitors. They'd stripped away mercy, stripped away choice. Now here they were, hunting children. Kale knew he couldn't wait. If the scanner swept again, it would pick up more. He had to strike first. He breathed in, slow and steady, then slid into motion. Years of training took over. Silent steps. Low stance. Rifle raised. One shot. The lead soldier dropped before he even realized what had happened, the round tearing through his visor with surgical precision. Sparks flared, and his body hit the ground in a metallic clatter. Contact, the second shouted, spinning, firing blindly into the dark. Bolts of blue plasma hissed past Kale's position, scorching the wall. He ducked, rolled, and returned. Fire. 2 rounds. Sharp and controlled. One-hit armor, sparking off. The second slammed into the soldier's leg. Dropping him to a knee, the third soldier charged, roaring through his modulator. He swung his rifle like a club, aiming to bash Kale's head clean off. Kale sidestepped, bringing his knife up in a swift arc. Steel met flesh under armor plates, and the soldier staggered, choking on his own blood. It was over in less than 15 seconds. Kale stood over the fallen, breathing hard, sweat streaking down his temple. The tunnel was quiet again, save for the faint hiss of dying circuitry. Rex padded into view. Teeth bared, growls still rumbling in his throat. The children followed a step behind, wide-eyed, clutching each other. Kale wiped the blade clean and crouched to their level. It's all right, it's over. But he knew it wasn't. If a patrol had found its way this deep into the tunnels, others would follow. The Legion wouldn't stop until they had him, and the children would be collateral damage. Kale stripped the fallen soldiers of useful gear, fresh power cells, ammo packs, a half-burned ration bar. He tucked it all into his pack, then paused. At the scanner device, dangerous to keep, dangerous to leave behind, he smashed it against the wall until it was nothing but broken. Glass and wire. Then he turned to the children again. They were trembling but watching him closely. Lyra, the eldest, reached out and touched his gauntlet. Her silver eyes met his, steady, despite the fear. Safe, she asked, in broken human tongue. Kale swallowed. His voice felt heavier than the rifle in his hands. Not yet, but I'll get you there. He didn't know if it was true. But he needed them to believe it, and maybe, deep down, he needed to believe it himself. The next hours were a blur of movement. Kale led them deeper into the subway maze. Moving fast but cautious, He avoided the main tunnels, slipping through maintenance shafts and crumbling passages where even the Legion's machines hesitated to go. The air grew damp, heavy with mold and rust. The children clung close, their faint glow illuminating the dark corridors in a ghostly green hue. Rex padded ahead at times, nose twitching, ears sharp, a silent scout. At one point, Nemi stumbled, her small legs too tired to keep pace. Kale scooped her up without hesitation, resting her weight easily against his armored chest. The child curled into him, small hands gripping his plates as though he were a fortress she could hide inside. It broke him in ways he hadn't expected. Anna used to hold him the same way. Back before the world burned, he shook the thought away, forcing himself back into the present. Sentiment could get them killed. And yet he couldn't help but feel it, the ache. The fragile spark of something he thought he had lost forever. By the time they reached a collapsed chamber, Kale knew they needed rest. The kids were stumbling, Rex was limping slightly, and even his own legs felt like lead. He set up a small camp in the corner of the chamber, using rubble and bent steel beams as cover. He gave the children sips of water, rationed carefully. The ration bar he split 3 ways, giving them each a piece, while he pretended he wasn't hungry. They ate slowly, their strange, glowing eyes never leaving him. Finally, when they were curled up together, Kale sat with Rex at his side, running a hand over the old dog's head. "Still with me, boy?" Rex gave a low huff, leaning into his touch. Loyal as always, Kale stared into the darkness. His mind churned. He knew he couldn't keep running forever. The Legion would never stop. He needed to find the sanctuary. He had only heard whispers about a place where humans and the surviving alien refugees had carved out something resembling peace, if it even existed. But it was their only hope. Kale looked at the sleeping children, their breathing steady, faces finally peaceful for the first time in days. For them, he would find it. For them, he would fight. And if it came to it, for them, he would die. Kale did not sleep that night. He sat with his back to the cold stone, rifle across his lap, and Rex lying watchful at his side. The children huddled together beneath the ragged fabric Kale had scavenged, their breaths slow and even. For the first time since he had found them, they looked almost peaceful. But Kale's mind refused rest. His instincts, honed by years of war, warned him that every moment of stillness was borrowed. The Legion would come again. They always did. At some point, a faint dripping echoed through the chamber, water leaking from a fractured pipe. A sound grew steady, hypnotic, like the beat of a drum. Pulled him into thoughts he had buried deep of Anna, of his wife, of the life that had been burned to ash. He closed his eyes just for a moment. He remembered Anna's laughter as she ran through the fields near their home before the war reached their world. She had chased Rex back then when the dog was young and fast, her tiny hands reaching for his tail. His wife had stood on the porch, smiling, calling them in for supper. It had been ordinary, beautiful, fragile, and then the sky had burned. Kale's eyes snapped open. He forced the memory away, though it lingered like a knife in his chest. He could not live in the past. Not anymore. By dawn, the children stirred. Lyra was the first to rise, stretching her thin arms and blinking her silver eyes. She noticed Kale immediately, still awake, and frowned softly. "You? No sleep?" she asked, her words halting but clear. Kale shook his head. Didn't need. It was a lie, and maybe she knew it, but she only nodded and went to wake her siblings gently. They ate the last crumbs of the ration bar. Washed down with careful sips of water, Kale knew supplies were running thin. They would need to surface. Soon, risk scavenging. "Stay close today," he told them, strapping on his rifle. "No wandering, no noise. Understand?" Lyra repeated his words to the younger ones in her native tongue, and they nodded obediently. Rex barked once, a low muffled sound as if agreeing. The tunnels twisted for miles, some passages blocked by collapsed ceilings, others flooded waist-deep with stagnant water. Kale led them carefully, always alert, always listening. He avoided the wider tracks, sticking to the narrow maintenance shafts, but eventually, the air grew stale, heavy with the stink of mold and oil. They needed fresh air. They needed food. They needed hope. Cale found a stairwell that led up to the surface, the door rusted, but still intact. He pressed his ear against it, listening. Silence. He pushed it open slowly, and sunlight spilled in. Blinding after so long underground, the world above was a graveyard. Buildings leaned like broken teeth. Their glass windows shattered, their steel bones exposed. The streets were littered with rusted vehicles, their husks long abandoned. Nature had begun to reclaim some places, weeds splitting asphalt, vines crawling up walls. But the scars of war were everywhere, burned craters, collapsed towers, the hushed silence of a city that had died screaming. Cale scanned the horizon, visor adjusting. No drones, no Legion troops. For now, he motioned the children up. They squinted at the light, shielding their eyes. Nemi clung to his hand, her tiny fingers squeezing tight. Stay low, Cale whispered. Follow me. They moved through the ruins like shadows. Cale led them to what had once been a corner market. The roof was half collapsed, shelves overturned, but some food might remain. He signaled for Rex to scout ahead, the dog bounding silently over debris. No bark, no growl. Safe enough inside, Cale searched quickly, efficient in his movements. Most of the cans were rusted through, packaging long spoiled. But tucked behind a shelf, he found 3 sealed cans of beans, dusty but intact. He allowed himself the smallest breath of relief. He handed one can to Lyra, showing her how to open it with his knife. Her eyes widened when the food appeared inside, and she quickly shared it with her siblings. They ate eagerly, though Cale forced himself to take only a few bites. He would not starve, but they could not afford weakness. Rex lapped water from a cracked bottle. Cale poured out. For a moment, it almost felt normal, a family sharing a meal. The thought made Cale's throat tighten. Then the sound came. A deep, metallic thrum, rolling across the ruins like distant thunder. Cale froze, eyes narrowing. Knew that sound. Dropships down, he hissed, pulling the children into cover. Beneath the collapsed counter, he crouched over them, shielding them with his body as the shadow of the dropship passed over the street, through a crack in the wall. He glimpsed the vessel, sleek, black, armored, with the Legion's insignia emblazoned on its hull. It hovered low, searchlights cutting across the ruins, scanning for signs of life. Cale held his breath. The children clung to him, trembling. Rex pressed low against the ground, silent as stone. The dropship hovered for endless seconds. Then it moved on, disappearing beyond the skyline. Cale exhaled slowly. But his heart did not slow. The Legion was closing in. They didn't just patrol randomly. They were hunting, and Cale knew they were hunting him that night. After they found shelter in a burned-out apartment building, Cale sat alone by the broken window, staring at the distant glow of Legion lights on the horizon. The children slept behind him, curled together. Rex dozed but stirred every few minutes, ears twitching. Cale touched the scar on his chest, where an old wound had nearly killed him years ago. The Legion thought they had broken him then. They thought he had no fight left, but they were wrong. For Anna. For these children, if whatever fragile hope still flickered in this broken world, Cale would fight, and if the Legion wanted him, he would learn what it meant to hunt the last Guardian. The night dragged on, long and restless. Cale leaned against the broken window frame, eyes fixed on the faint glow of the Legion's patrols in the distance. He could see them moving searchlights sweeping methodically across the ruined streets. Armored vehicles crawling like predators through the dark. Every instinct screamed at him to move. But exhaustion weighed down his body like iron. The children needed rest. Rex needed rest. Even Cale, though he would never admit it, felt his strength thinning. He forced himself to wait. Timing mattered more than anything. Behind him, the children stirred in their sleep. Nemi murmured something in her alien tongue, curling tighter, into her sister's arms. Cale turned his head slightly, watching them. For a brief moment, he let the hard mask of the soldier slip away. They looked so small, so fragile. Yet there was something unyielding in the way they held on to one another. Survivors. Just like him. Rex patted over quietly, pressing his muzzle into Kale's armored knee. The dog's dark eyes met his, steady and loyal. Kale scratched behind his ears absently. "We'll keep them safe, boy," he whispered, "no matter what it costs." By morning, the Legion was gone. The horizon was gray with dust and dawn, the air heavy with the metallic taste of ash. Kale roused the children gently, handing them sips of water and letting them finish what little remained of the beans. "We move," he said simply. They traveled north, Kale guiding them through the skeleton of the city. He knew these streets well. He had fought here once, when the war still raged openly. Every corner held memories. Every ruined block was a graveyard. As they passed a collapsed overpass, Kale's visor picked up faint heat signatures ahead. Raised a fist, signaling a halt. The children froze, clinging to one another, their glowing eyes wide with fear. Kale crouched low, creeping forward with his rifle ready. Through the broken concrete he saw them. Survivors, not Legion. Humans, ragged and gaunt, armed with makeshift weapons. Scavengers. Kale's breath slowed. He knew their kind. Desperate, dangerous, more likely to stab you for your boots than share a fire. He considered circling wide, avoiding them entirely. But then he noticed one of them was injured, leg wrapped in filthy cloth, barely able to stand. The others whispered urgently, glancing around like cornered animals. Rex crept up beside him, ears low, growl rumbling faintly. Kale weighed his options. He couldn't risk the children, yet leaving the scavengers behind. It went against something. In him. And then one of the scavengers looked directly his way. Kale cursed under his breath. Too late for stealth, he rose slowly, rifle lowered but ready. The scavengers tensed instantly, raising their rusted blades and scavenged pistols. "Easy," Kale called out, his voice steady, commanding. "I'm not here to fight."
Ow.
The leader, a tall man with a scar down his cheek, sneered. "Then why hide in the rubble, soldier?" Kale didn't answer. His armor gave him away, even if worn and scarred. To scavengers, he wasn't just another survivor. He was a relic of power, of the war that had ruined them. "Got supplies, don't you?" Another hissed, eyes greedy. "Food, weapons." Tightened his grip on the rifle. "You don't want to test me?" For a moment, the air was electric, tense enough to snap. Then the injured scavenger coughed violently, doubling over. The leader glanced at him, hesitation flickering in his eyes. Kale saw it, without lowering his weapon. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small med kit, one of the last he had. He tossed it onto the ground between them, the scavengers. Froze, stunned. "Take it," Kale said, "for him. Then go." The leader stared at him, suspicion battling with desperation. Finally, he snatched the kit, glaring at Kale like he couldn't understand why mercy had been shown. "Next time, soldier," he spat, motioning for his group to leave. "Next time you won't be so lucky." Kale didn't move until they were gone. When he returned to the children, Lyra looked up at him with wide, searching eyes. She hadn't understood the words, but she had seen everything. "Why?" she asked softly. Kale crouched, meeting her gaze. "Because mercy is rarer than bullets," he said. "And sometimes it's worth more." She seemed to think about that for a long time as they continued their journey. By dusk, they reached the edge of the city, from a ridge of broken stone. Kale could see beyond the ruins, into the wasteland. The land stretched endlessly, a scarred desert of ash and twisted metal. The horizon shimmered with heat, though the air was cold. There was nothing but emptiness between here and the faint mountains in the distance, but Kale knew. What lay beyond those mountains? The sanctuary? Or at least the hope of it. He rested a hand on Lyra's shoulder, pointing. "That's where we're going." She followed his gesture, her silver eyes wide. "Safe." Kale nodded, though uncertainty nodded him. Safe, behind them. The wind carried a faint, distant sound, the unmistakable hum of Legion engines. Time was running out. The wasteland opened up before them like a graveyard of the world that once was. Twisted steel beams jutted out of the ground like bones, old vehicles half buried in sand and dust. Their windows shattered and frames rusting under the endless sky. Every step crunched against debris. The silence broken only by the wind's mournful howl. The children trudged along behind Cale, their small legs struggling to keep pace, but not once did they complain. They simply looked at him with a quiet, unspoken trust. The trust was heavier on Cale's shoulders than the armor he carried. Rex scouted ahead, nose low to the ground, ears twitching. His silhouette moved with predatory grace, every sense alert for danger. By nightfall, Cale found an old transport truck flipped onto its side. Its hollow shell offered some shelter from the wind, and he guided the children inside. They huddled together while Cale set down his pack, lighting a small plasma torch for warmth. The blue flame flickered weakly, casting soft shadows across their faces. "Story?" Nemi whispered suddenly, breaking the long silence. Cale looked at her, caught off guard. "A story?" She nodded quickly, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Lyra and the boy leaned closer too, waiting. Cale hadn't told a story in years. Soldiers didn't tell fairy tales. They lived nightmares. But the children's eyes pleaded with him, and against his better judgment. He let himself remember. There was once, he began slowly, a world where the skies were clear and the rivers ran blue. Children played in fields of green, and no one had to hide in ruins. People built towers so tall they touched the clouds, and ships that sailed among the stars. The children's faces lit with wonder, though Cale's voice grew heavy. But then war came. The skies burned. The rivers turned to dust, and those towers fell. Nemi frowned, clutching Lyra's hand. "Like now?" Cale hesitated. He didn't want to shatter their fragile hope. He softened his tone. "Yes. But even in the darkest times, there were those who protected others, who fought not for themselves, but for those who could not fight. Like you, Lyra," whispered Cale froze. The words struck him deeper than he expected. He wanted to deny it, to say he wasn't that man anymore, just a broken soldier, running from ghosts. But their trust wouldn't let him speak the lie. He nodded once. "Like me." Silence fell again, broken only by the wind whistling through the cracks of the truck. One by one, the children drifted to sleep. Rex curled up near the opening, his head resting on his paws, always listening. Cale sat awake long after, a rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the horizon. His body ached with exhaustion, but he didn't dare rest. The wasteland had eyes, and the Legion was relentless. Hours passed before his visor detected movement, heat signatures, approaching. Cale's breath tightened. He tapped Rex gently, and the dog lifted his head instantly, growling low. The children stirred. Sensing the tension, Cale motioned for silence. He extinguished the plasma torch, plunging them into darkness. The faint glow of the children's eyes was the only light now, and he quickly signaled them to cover their faces. Through the crack in the truck, Cale saw them drones, 3 of them, hovering low. Searchlights cutting across the ground in sweeping arcs. Their mechanical hum sent shivers down his spine. Legion scouts. Cale's grip tightened on his rifle. He knew the danger. If the drones found them, the signal would bring troops within minutes. He weighed his choices fast. Fight and risk exposing them, or hide and pray the machines passed. The children's breaths were shallow, trembling in the dark. Rex pressed against his leg, waiting for command. Cale closed his eyes, steadying himself. He whispered so low it was barely sound. "Stay quiet. Don't move." The drones drew closer, beams slicing across the wreckage. One stopped, turning slowly toward the truck. Cale raised his rifle, aiming through the gap. His finger hovered over the trigger. The drone's searchlight swept once, twice, then lingered. Cale's pulse pounded in his ears. Then suddenly, Rex barked. The sound split the silence like a gunshot. The drone shifted instantly, engines whining as it surged toward the truck. Cale didn't hesitate. He fired. The blast lit the night, the drone exploding into a shower of sparks. The other 2 spun an alarm, their sensors locking onto his position. "Run." Kale shouted, shoving the children toward the far side of the wreck. They scrambled, terrified, while Rex leapt out, teeth bared, charging one of the drones. Kale fired again, taking down the second. The third darted higher, retreating fast. No, Kale roared, firing wildly. The shots missed, scorching the night sky. The drone vanished into the dark, and with it, hope of staying hidden was gone. Kale turned to the children, who clung to each other in fear. His voice was harsh, urgent. "They know where we are. We move now." Rex barked once, blood dripping from his muzzle, where shrapnel had grazed him. Still, he stood ready. Kale gathered the children close, his heart pounding. The wasteland stretched ahead, endless, merciless. But behind them, the Legion was coming, and this time, there would be no hiding. Asterisk.